We're going to start out a little bit by disambiguating what exactly is, how do we define a social media influencer? Because I do think, like you said, everybody in this room defines a social media influencer differently. And with the help of some familiar faces here, we'll take a look and say, back in my day, there was really only one social media influencer. I got some chuckles. That was Tom from MySpace. That was before the days of Facebook. Everybody wanted to be Tom's friend, of course. But when Facebook started, and to give you a bit of how old I am here, actually the oldest of our three panelists this morning, which is the first time that's ever happened to me. Facebook was invented while I was an undergrad. So we've really had this big onset of social media influencers and development over the last 15 years. And I would say the first thing I think of when you think of social media influencers might be celebrities. Maybe these guys look familiar. Well, maybe the ClickShare screen looks familiar. Well, it's a picture of Billy Baldwin and Paul Reiser. Do we know who those folks are? Binghamton alums, right? So we would all recognize those fellas from being on our silver screens, might be on TV. I know my mom watched Mad About You every single night. Right? So those folks certainly would identify as social media influencers with their respective audiences. A celebrity, though, is a really antiquated way, I think, of defining what a social media influencer is, right? These guys may have started their own social media channels because of what they were provided from their appearances on their shows, right? A second definition of a social media influencer might be someone with a whole lot of followers. So here again are a couple of familiar faces that have once again disappeared from our screen. It's a disappearing act, so we'll use the space here and we'll enjoy. We had Jenna Wolfe, Binghamton alum, and Ingrid Michelson, each themselves with hundreds of thousands of followers on their Twitter and Instagram platforms. But for my money, Steve, social media influencers, it's really not a definition of being a celebrity or the number of followers that you have, but so to me, a social media influencer is anyone who's earned the trust of their audience through their expertise. These are three examples of social media influencers in my life who you might not recognize. In fact, I would bet that you don't. There's Tiffany Lanier on the left. She started a civic-minded social media organization called I Can't Wait to Vote in 2020, starting in Florida to get younger people to get out and vote. My friend JMatt MKE in Milwaukee is a TikTok influencer who has done 25 push-ups a day for the last 750 days to raise awareness for suicide prevention awareness. And on the right there is a chiropractor. She is in fact my chiropractor. Her name is Dr. Molly Spahn, and she influences me through her expertise in the chiropractic field. And so for each one of us in this room, our perspective on who social media influencers are is going to be totally different. We might see those celebrities, we might see those folks with a lot of followers as social media influencers. But depending on who you are, what your perspective is, where you come from, what your interests are, your view of social media influencers are going to be very different. So let's dive into, Armand, 3 harsh realities about social media influencers, right? The age of celebrities as we know it is over. This was the television that I used to watch when I was a kid. How many of you guys remember a TV that looked something like this? Where you had to sort of turn the dial to change the channel. There were 7 or 8 channels. And those were the celebrities. Those were your influencers. You had a very limited number of people that you could pick from to watch on TV, or you could turn the TV off. And now in 2021, nobody's seen a TV like that in ages. There are dozens and dozens of social media platforms themselves that each one of them has thousands of influencers of their own that you can pick from, that you can go on and select and enjoy who you enjoy hearing from. So this massive fragmentation of the industry has really led to this wide disambiguation. What is a social media influencer? How do we define it? Anybody recognize the faces on this screen? Do we know any of them? Who's the guy on the right? Who's the one on the left?
I don't remember his name.
She doesn't remember his name.
No, I don't.
Charlie D'Amelio. The one in the middle is Charlie D'Amelio.
The one in the middle is Charlie D'Amelio, right, from TikTok. He's got 125
I
million.
have teenage
Gotcha. He has teenage girls. So the guy on the left is Ninja. He is the #1 most followed Twitch streamer. He has 17 million followers on Twitch. And then the gentleman on the right, anybody got it?
Mr. Beast.
It's Mr. Beast, right? 71 million subscribers on his YouTube channel. And these are just the top representatives on each of these platforms. For each one of those platforms and some of the other ones that my friends up here will talk about as we go on today, there are thousands more influencers that you can tune into and subscribe to, where you can't just say these are the specific set of social media influencers that exist. And these platforms themselves have exploded over the last decade. Twitch had 17 billion hours of watch time in 2020, which was up almost 100% from 9 billion in 2019. TikTok has 700 million monthly active users, and YouTube has, I think it's 71 million channels that you can select from on YouTube. Could you imagine having 71 million dials that you could turn to on your TV growing up? And of those 71 million channels, more than 23,000 of them have more than 1 million subscribers themselves. So when you talk about a mega influencer, you find someone with 1 million subscribers, Steve, there's 23,000 of those that you could pick from on YouTube alone. And every day that number continues to grow. And so I really want to remind you that your follower count really doesn't matter. Anybody recognize this gentleman? Dr. Stenger just talked about him. This is our buddy Stanley Whittingham, right? Our Nobel Prize winning professor. And for the fun of it, I looked up probably the brightest man, one of the brightest men in the country on social media, and I found out that he doesn't even have a cover photo on his Twitter account. He has tweeted a total number of 4 times, and he has 75 followers. So, Stan, you can take your Nobel Prize. I've got about 1,000 times more Twitter followers than you do. So take that, buddy. So, but again, I think the lesson here is that when you look at an influencer, when you look at any account on social media, I largely encourage you to ignore their follower count and look instead at the quality of the content and the value that they're providing to you as a viewer, as a subscriber. Right, anybody know who this is? It's on the screen. It's Gary Vaynerchuk, Gary V. And he says, it's not the number of followers you have or the number of likes that you get. It's the strength of your bond with your followers. I was going to have the screen right in front of me. It's over there now. That indicates how much anyone cares about what you have to say. In this game, the one with the most real relationships wins. And that's the real power of social media. And I'm going to talk in a minute here about a little bit more about myself and how I've grown in the social media industry over the years. But it's about those real relationships that you develop. And our topic today was about social media influencers reaching the masses. Social media influencers reaching the masses. And I'm here to tell you that reaching the masses is not, and has not been for at least a decade, a reasonable objective to try and follow. Reaching the masses, if you go into a meeting about social media, I'm sure these guys would agree and say, hey, I want to reach the masses, you get laughed out of the room. A big part of becoming a social media influencer is identifying your specific audience and developing content and engaging and building relationships with those people that want to engage with you. So this is Mark Schaefer. He's the author of a fantastic book called Known. He's a good friend of mine. He's based down in Tennessee. And Mark says in his book, the lesson here is that there's no universal answer to the question, how big does my audience need to be? It depends on who you need to connect with and what you want to achieve. Life is a long path. You meet a lot of different people along the way. Maybe all you need is one follower if it's a person who will change the course of your life. And I've followed that mantra to a T over the years. I don't have hundreds of thousands or millions of followers. I go out and I speak on stages. I go out and do the work that I do that I'm going to touch on here in the next couple slides. Because when I get a chance to connect with you in person, when I get a chance to meet you here on campus, I want to impact your life. Even if the tech's not working and I got to go first. But I want my work and what I do on social media to impact who you are. Nothing about changing the masses. So this is how I've tried to take on working in the social media industry since I graduated back in 2007 as the Giving Day guy. There's a photo of me working at a fundraising event in Louisville. That was about 6 months before the pandemic began, so no worries there. That was lovely 2019. And I work with these fundraising events around the US to help them raise tens of millions of dollars. In fact, I've worked about 24 of these events. Cumulatively, they've raised more than $72 million, and I've created more than 350 live stream videos over the last 4 years of doing this. I've written my 3 books. Steve mentioned 50 States, 100 Days. We have the new book out, 15 Seconds of Fame, and we're going to incentivize you, I think, at the end of the hour here to pose some questions, and I'm going to hand out some of those signed books for you here before we get going. I'm a Forbes contributor, so I write about how nonprofits use social media effectively to drive results around the world. And I partnered with some of the biggest brands in the world, including Humana, Big Brothers Big Sisters of America, and the Salvation Army. Am I doing okay on time? We're like 10 minutes in? Okay, perfect. And like I mentioned, I'm based in Greenville, South Carolina, which made it extraordinarily easy for me to get here this weekend from GSP Airport. So here's my last section here, 3 keys to becoming a social media influencer. Because as I mentioned, each and every one of you guys, I think if you have a social media account, how many of you guys are on Facebook? Everybody? Okay, good. How about Twitter? All right, mostly everybody. Okay. Instagram? So I would say that everyone in this room already is a social media influencer to those who follow you and those who connect with you. Maybe that wasn't what you were expecting to hear from me this morning, but I think it's true. But here are my keys to really becoming an effective and scalable social media influencer. I want you to figure out what you both love to do and what you're great at and go all in on that. So when you're creating anything on social media, on any of those social media channels, understand what it is that your followers are looking to you for and create along that vein 100% all in, right? You can't, like you said, try and reach the masses, but you can go all in on what you do. And that's a screenshot of me having some fun with my microphone in my home studio, setting up and really creating a stage for those nonprofits. That was Give Local 757, which is Hampton Roads, Virginia. Had to produce that one virtually, but as you can see on that live stream, we were able to bring on 4 different nonprofits at a time and provide them that same stage and make them feel like they're the star of the show on that social media platform. I encourage you to be exactly the same online as you are offline. Do not ever try and be somebody different than who you are in real life. And I'm just so blessed that a couple of my friends are here, Christina Ritter and her dad. I think Christina would agree. I met Christina, she was my RD back in 2007, back in Mohawk Hall in CIW. Any CIW alums here? All right, shout out to you guys. Social media wasn't really a thing when I was a student here in Binghamton. And so growing up in this social media age, all I've ever tried to do on social media is be who I am and use these platforms to leave the world a better place than when I got here. And that's the same thing I've tried to do offline as well. So don't try and be somebody different, but just be that same compassionate and empathetic, energetic human being that you are, that hopefully I'll get a chance to meet a lot of you guys at the end of the program here. Be that same person online and it will translate really well. And I encourage you to think like a fan. What value can you provide to your specific audience, right? What is it that you are great at that you can tell people about in a scalable way? The platforms will take care of the scale. You just have to think about how you can expand on who you are and what you do. And you can apply these lessons either to your personal brand as a social media influencer, or as I'm sure Sydney will talk a little bit more about, using this from a business perspective to be able to drive those business results. And I'm going to give you this, my last slide here, Steve, a bonus. And this is what I always encourage every nonprofit that I work with around the country to remember. Know that your message can change and possibly save somebody's life. A lot of nonprofits are just too shy to go out there because they compare themselves, Steve, to these mega influencers that have hundreds of thousands or millions of followers, and they say, I'm not Ninja, I'm not Charlie D'Amelio, nobody cares what I have to say. And I'm here in Binghamton, technically Vestal, sorry, to remind you that your message matters. That we are all social media influencers, and at the end of the day, hope this one works. We are all famous to a few people, and that includes you. Thank you so much.